You wake up at dawn, the sky burns red. The drums have started. Today is the day you give your heart to the sun. This is not a nightmare. This was once reality in the mighty Aztec Empire. The most sacred gift was blood, and to stop giving meant the world would end. In this video, we journey into one of the darkest rituals in human history, not as outsiders, but as witnesses, to understand not just what they did, but why they believed they had to. And time breathes through the dust. Stood a city carved, not just from rock, but from rhythm, blood, and silence. His name was in the heart of the Valley of Mexico, where the sun scorches the stones, rising like a vision above the lake. It shimmered with white stone temples and obsidian mirrors. A city of engineers, poets, astronomers, and executioners. Their robes were crimson, their hands stained in ways no amount of ash could cleanse. And in their silence, they carried a truth whispered only in the wild. The gods gave blood to create us. The body would die, but the heart, the Tiolia, their animating soul, would rise into the sky to follow the sun on its eternal journey. Now, we give blood to keep them awake. It was the jewel of the Aztec Empire, and within its sacred plazas, beneath the golden sun god, the heart of man was believed to be the very fuel of the universe. They did not call it murder. They called it balance. Fed the finest maize, clothed in cotton, dyed with cochineal red. His hair oiled and perfumed with coke. Wherever he walked, people bowed not, in pity, but reverence. He was now Exipla, divine image, a vessel of the gods. To harm him was sacrilege. He was no longer, he was the sun awaiting rebirth. Each morning, the priests of Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun, ascended the steep stairs of the Templemare. But who were the ones chosen? He remembered the scent of her hair when she held him after a storm, and he wondered, would she see him again in the stars? Not always criminals, not always enemies, often volunteers, captives of war, yes, but also those who believed that death in this way was the highest honor, not with cruelty, but with detachment. A sacred duty required silence. They prepared their obsidian blades, honed them until they could part hair from flesh without pressure. These were not weapons of rage. They were tools of ritual, cold, precise, revered. That was the belief. He was a poet's son, raised in the southern quarter of the city where the walls were painted with dreams. But one night, when the wind turned cold and the sky burned violet, he dreamed of fire devouring the moon. In the morning, he went to the temple and offered himself. And belief in was as solid as obsidian and as sharp. There was a boy, his name lost to time, like so many, but let us call him Cute Lackley the Jaguar. He was not a warrior. They say he did not weep. For 10 days, he was treated as royalty, but that did not mean he was not afraid. At night, when the drums were silent and the torches burned low, he would sit beneath the temple and whisper his mother's name. The priests watched him. On the 11th day, the sun rose red, and Kuchlakli climbed the stairs atop the Great Pyramid. The sky had never looked so near. Clouds drifted like spirits above the Valley of Am, and below, stretched outward like a mosaic of life, color and silence. Every street, every canal, every rooftop was still, but his eyes, those eyes did not tremble, because today the city held its breath. Their skin was darkened with soot, their earlobes torn wide with jade, their hair matted with blood and incense. But it was the high priest Tlacaelel who bore the obsidian blade. His hand sculptor's hands held the knife, not with force, but with reverence, as though it were a brush. And this sacrifice, a sacred painting. Kuchlakli stood at the summit of the Templemare. The wind pressed his tunic against his chest, revealing the thin frame of a boy who had not yet seen 80. The priests were already waiting. It was already darkened from years of ritual, its surface grooved with time, its mouth thirsty. There were 5 of them, each bearing the marks of a lifetime bound to the divine. Beside them stood the Kuchlakli was led to the sacrificial stone abroad, curved slab, polished smooth and cool beneath the sun. He lay down willingly, for priest took his limbs, not harshly, but firmly, stretching his arms and legs outward like the petals of a flower about to open. And then the drums began. The obsidian, sharp as glass and held by steady hands, opened the chest in a single vertical motion, and in those beats, the gods would listen. The rib cage was parted swiftly. Beneath it, beating still, was the heart, slow, deep, echoing across the plaza below. Through the temples, through the bones of every soul present, each beat a breath. Below, the people watched not with horror, but this was the cost of the cosmos. This was how the sun rose, how the rain fell, how maize grew golden in the fields. Each breath a step closer. The high priest leaned over her. There were no prayers. The gods did not need words, only blood. The blade flashed once in years of famine or war, 100. Each victim, a prayer carved in flesh. Each heart, a candle lit on the altar of eternity. It was not like the stories. It was not a scream or a spray. It was something quieter, like cloth being torn. Dancers, cloaked in human hide, moved through the city like spirits of spring returning from the underworld. And still, the people sang. It was said that in the moment between the cutting and the death, the heart would beat 3 more times outside the body. The priest reached in and raised the heart to the sun. A hush fell. Even the drums stopped, and the heart pulsed once, twice, then fell silent. The body was not discarded. It was sacred. They painted the face with chalk and red ochre, dressed it in fine feathers, and carried it down the steps in slow procession. And the heart, it was placed into the Quaxicali so that the gods might feed, so that the balance might hold. But that was only one board. In a single festival, they were vessels transformed. The skin of some was worn by priests for days, as symbols of rebirth. For in death, they believed, came life. They believed the world had ended 4 times, each age destroyed by failure, by fire, by flood, by beasts, by darkness. The Aztec worldview was not cyclical, it was fragile. Every morning the sun rose not because it must, but because it was fed. The gods had once sacrificed themselves to ignite the sun and set the stars into motion. Now it was humanity's turn to return the favor, to live owes a debt. In their myths, the god Nana-Watson, a lowly, disfigured being, had thrown himself into the sacred fire when greater gods hesitated. Families would offer their children during droughts to the rain god. The chosen were dressed in blue and white, adorned with jade, and brought to the sacred mountain. It is said that their tears before death were signs of blessing. The more they cried, the more Tlachtla would weep over the earth in return. His sacrifice became the 5th sun of the current world. But without new blood, even Nana-Watson's fire would wither. That was the unshakable truth. If the gods bled for mankind, mankind must bleed for them. This was not metaphor, it was instruction. And so, the people gave not just to captured enemies on foreign fields, but their own kin, of a day where the sun would rise weak, dim, flickering. In a world of hunger and loss and invasion, belief was the one thing that stood still and never returned. That the crops would fail, the rivers dry, the stars scattered. They whispered of earlier ages when the gods demanded less, when offerings were songs, dance, incense. But those days, they said, were swept away by war, by politics, by power, by empire, that the world would crack and gods would abandon them not out of wrath, but from hunger. There was no cruelty in this not to. There was fear, yes, but a deeper fear than death. The fear of cosmic collapse. The priests knew this. They were not butchers. They were caretakers, accountants of eternity, and they carried the weight of a terrifying equation. If we stop, everything ends. To question this was dangerous, but some did. Among them were the elder scribes, who preserved versions of the old myths not taught in public ceremonies. The Aztec state had become addicted to tribute, to dominance, to blood, and still, the people believed, because belief had structure, it had ritual, it had pageantry, it offered meaning. So, when 1,000 hearts beat for the sun at the dedication of the Temple Mare in 1487, 1,000, they did not see horror, they saw triumph, a bridge between man and the divine. And if that bridge was slick with blood, so be it. The world continued, the maize grew, the sun returned, and no one forgot to give thanks. The Spaniards arrived not with gods, but with fire. In 1519, stepped onto the shores of what we now call Mexico, not as a conqueror at first, but as a question. The Aztecs had long watched the stars for signs, and now the signs stood before them, armored and bearded, with thunder in their hands and steel in their eyes. They had no word for cannon, no word for Europe, but they had a word for destiny, and some believed this, too, was divine will. When Emperor Moctezuma Temeti offered gifts not just gold, but rich, he showed him the temples, the calendars, the hearts still warm from the morning's sacrifice. Did not understand, He saw only barbarism. He saw thrones built from bone and children crying beneath obsidian knives. He saw an empire of blood. The misunderstanding was total and irreversible, with that of priests, warriors, women, children. Spaniards turned the altars to rubble. They burned the codices, smashed the statues, tore the feathers from ceremonial cloaks, and laughed. The gods did not answer. The sky did not darken. There was no vengeance. The Aztecs believed they were sustaining the world. The Spanish believed they were ending evil. In 1520, the Templo Mayor ran red again, but not with sacred blood, only silence. And then came smallpox, invisible, unstoppable. It swept through the capital faster than any army. Whole districts emptied. The dead filled canals. The temples, once echoing with chants, fell quiet. Now we sacrifice not on altars, but in wars, in famine, in silence. The names have changed. The gods wear suits. But still, something is always being given. The heart offerings ceased not from doubt, but from exhaustion. There were too few to perform the rites, too few to die. On August 13, 1521 fell, and with it the world the Aztecs believed they had protected for centuries. But here's what they never told the conquistadors. Even as the temples burned, even as the obsidian knives were buried beneath European stone, some still believed the gods were watching. Not from heaven, not from myth, but from the sky, waiting to be fed. And perhaps they were right, because since the fall of the world has changed, but not the hunger, still we bleed. And sometimes, when the sky turns red at dusk and the wind falls completely still, you can almost hear it. The drums, faint, insistent, calling for a heart, any heart, perhaps yours. The Aztec temples have crumbled. The obsidian blades lie buried, but the questions they raise still echo. If you felt the weight of this story, if the drums still ring faintly in your ears, don't let the past go silent. Subscribe for more dark histories, forbidden beliefs, and legends that might be true because some truths refuse to stay buried.